It's 1959 on the same date. This is about my fourth or fifth upload for my documentary. I'm just doing this for my own recollections and for the purpose of the message that I think is quite important to communicate, in particular with regard to the Vatican, Interpol, um, the European Parliament, with all that's been happening. It's common knowledge that I have been highly offended in County Kerry by individuals that have been exploiting from my birthrights and that have been offending my good name. And they've been lining their pockets from a spiritual purpose that is of sanity and sobriety principles. While they've been lining their pockets, they've been accumulating awful compound interest on their dirty debts that they've been evading since 2006, that I'm just so embarrassed to have to communicate on this documentary as a royal humanitarian of social reform and legislation. But there's a high level of injustice being conducted by individuals that have been living off my name and been living off my recovery advocacy. And some people, unfortunately, have been very quick to forget progress, the source of progress, the source of recovery, the source of, developments that have happened that have benefited people's pockets. But anyway, it's quite repulsive. It's disgraceful to anyone with a moral compass, which astonishes me that after so many truths coming to light and so much having been uncovered from my recovery advocacy and my experiences, strengths and hopes, that people would still put themselves at risk associating with culprits of more fraud. So there are people that have been disrespecting, I suppose, developments and regressing and working on the same basis, on the same prelude, on the same foundation of fraud that I was originally offended by in 2006. And they're still hopefully trying to acclimatise to a level of sanity and sobriety recovery that I've been working on with the fellowships since 2006, so it's nearly 20 years now. And there have been people that have been acclimatising and ascending and claiming to be of a calibre and quality that isn't actually obvious, apparent, present or witnessed in the circumstances that I'm experiencing as a professional. So it's basically hate crime. As I've said, they've tried to call it treason, they've tried to say it's all sorts of things. But the fact of the matter is that my husband is a missing person, my child is legally missing, he's only 8. And there's a very dangerous obstruction being conducted by people that are hoping to be of sanity and sobriety principles, which are really high values and ethics, beliefs and principles, most importantly, that are really, so important to practice in all areas of our life. So they're of social influencing. They've been making their point in the media, and they've been threatening the peace, and they're still holding on to the baton of bad behaviour, and they're still living off my land and hoping to, I suppose, prosper themselves even further. So it's common knowledge I'm being exploited from, and there's obstruction, and my child and my husband are missing, and my farms are at risk now as well. So these people are enjoying social reform, and they're hoping to be of sanity and sobriety principles, but unfortunately they're in breach of Salem, and they're in breach of the Catholic code, and they're in breach of the Protestant code, and they're in breach of all professional codes, really, which is why I find this so amusing that these people would have the audacity to continue in their same vein of endeavours that are offensive and regressive, and that have already been reprimanded and punished offences that we have witnessed already. So there's been wealth recovery, there's been health recovery, and that's come about as a consequence of my advocacy, which is also subject to academic fraud. So I hope the European Parliament, I'm currently suffering, I have about 3 or 4 ailments that I'm treating on my own. The doctors in this community have been uncooperative, to say the least, since these implications occurred by these culprits of offence and of social influencing, and setting a bad precedence really for the young You know, the young people are obviously witnessing what's going on in this community, and there's a clique that are compromising the doctors, you know. And COVID-19 is all about the health and wellness area, the industry of health and well-being. And I suppose I find it quite a challenge treating these matters on my own, but because I'm qualified and trained in these areas, it's not that much of a challenge. But that I'm met with more of these people that are in the way of progress, and that are still resorting to the same tactics and thinking they're going to be of, I suppose, more trespass intrusion and whatnot. They've already compromised doctors' positions. There are doctors that, whether they realise it or not, aren't really in a good position with the Hippocratic Oath, unfortunately, in this community. They've also implicated the health professionals that look after people's mental health, and they're still ASBOs threatening the peace and thinking they're an authority where they're really, really not qualified or really safe to be repeat offenders. So this is going on 20 years. The Garda Síochána are fully aware of the circumstances. I have contacted regarding the loss of my child since 2017, and it's a mortal sin, anyone would know, to come between a mother and child with illegal papers or unlawful papers or papers that aren't authentic and that aren't observing royal protocol or that aren't in accordance with the law. So the Hippocratic Oath has been offended, Salem has been highly offended, Catholicism has been offended, Protestantism, all the whole and the Constitution. So I'd like to know from the European Parliament what professionals are compromising their positions, their integrity, their credentials to facilitate or accommodate people that are responsible for crimes and conspiracy and controversy against my good name. I document my day every 20-minute intervals. I am living in a dingy apartment, and I own what I own, and I have what I have, and there are people designating my hierarchy of needs, and they're lining their pockets. And I'm just wondering how many people out there with children think it's safe that while living off my social reform and living off my wealth, that any initiative by social influencers that have failed and that are a fraud, I'm wondering how safe they think it is to be accommodating or associating with these people that are not in, good stead with so many tenets of modern day society. So the European Court of Human Rights, you've heard from me. My child is still a missing person. There are mentally unstable individuals that are conducting spiritual offences that are really unsafe to be accommodating. It's not safe for the children, it's not safe for the society, it's not safe for the future. And those that are of conspiracy, controversy or covetousness I'm really concerned about. People that are coveting, I have concerns for what you aren't content with from your own lifestyles and livelihoods. Those that have to cause this amount of trouble in society and to break so many codes of conduct, to violate so heavily, just to covet from me. I'm wondering, is there a mental, is that is considered a mental ailment or condition that isn't actually, I suppose, healthy or safe? So those people that are compromising the mental health professionals or the general practitioners are those people that are cheeky enough to be of creative, intellectual, academic fraud or theft from me. You might be careful about any further advances or intrusions before you are too quick or too impulsive or too irrational, or maybe even beyond the point of stable and bordering erratic in any more offences before actually providing to the table where you have been taking from. That being my table, where I haven't invited anyone to be welcoming themselves to my COVID-19 legislation that is all being frauded. So unfortunately, that's not going to be positive or progressive for the prosperity that I recovered. And that's going to have a penalty upon it now as well. So there are people in Europe that I'm contacting, particularly Germany. I have had fantastic experiences in Germany, and I am fully aware of how respectful the German society and mentality is towards the declaration and towards democracy. So Germany, if in Bonn or Berlin, if you're not too busy, the southwest of Ireland is causing more problems regarding their mentality of begrudgery. Some people are just enjoying the deadly sins too much, I suppose, and compromising their positive progress, hopefully, with sanity and sobriety principles. So the doctors as well that have compromised themselves with the Hippocratic Oath or their mental health values, please be aware that there have been already breaches of confidentiality, false reporting and defamation in my circumstances that led to unlawful detainments by individuals that have been of the sex industry, the sex trade, and that have not been in the best interests, acting or behaving or conducting in the best interests of men and women's health. So those people that are still active in County Kerry, I would appreciate the European Parliament addressing this matter. As I've mentioned, I'm of Royal Protocol. I hold about 5 or 6 royal titles, and my child is a missing person, and as is my husband also. This is considered a serious matter. Those that have been garnering the support, I suppose they've been publicising and they've been garnering and campaigning, but unfortunately their causes in the past haven't been too successful, and neither have their authenticity or their values been very evident or present. So those that are compromising themselves with this charade or initiative or vendetta against my good name or my bloodlines or my families, I hope they're aware of what those kind of offences implicate for their own safety or security in society. As we all know, the law always balances itself out. And those that are evading, exacerbating, it's astonishing that any politicians that are aware of what my advocacy has done for this country. I'm really surprised that there are still individuals compromising themselves for a repetition of what this community is still recovering from, regardless of the PR that has come from this community. This community has not recovered. This community has been hit with the consequences of fraud, and it's a sad sign at times that there has been loss, and there is still loss being incurred by individuals with no integrity or honourability, and that have disrespected people's family names and family lines and family futures. So Europe, if you wouldn't mind, there's a problem as usual in Southwest Ireland with a clique of social influencers that have failed to keep to a moral compass that is respectful or dignified towards humanity and human life. There's such an absence of respect towards the family unit and the progress that my recovery advocacy has initiated. I'd like to know where my husband and my child are as missing persons on this date, and as I have already notified the Garda Síochána and the Department of Justice and the politicians in Dublin, I'm wondering how is there such a delay, and who is in the way of my family being respected while people think they're safe walking onto my property where I don't welcome them. It's a sad sign of the times.